What's up YouTube, Capital G here, checking out the brand new Hakai archetype everybody is talking about. I guess that my best description for this archetype would be, it's kind of like the Vrain's version of Scraps. I remember when Scraps came out during 5Ds and Duelist Revolution, I looked at the cards and I was like, wait a minute, you want us to blow our own cards up? Isn't our opponent supposed to do that? This archetype is super destruction based. You blow your cards up, you blow your opponent's cards up. This archetype also has this crazy kind of mechanic where you can link summon using your opponent's monsters, which is insane. Some of these cards let you do it during your opponent's turn, which that is actually remarkable. But let's go ahead and check out the archetype, because I believe we have 9 cards and this archetype only has 3 main deck monsters as of right now, so just keep that in mind. The first one is Hakai Doji Tiara. This is a level 3 Fire Fiend monster. The entire archetype is Fiend based, 1500 attack, 1500 defense, hard once per turn. On the first and second effects, first effect says you can target one card you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except fiend monsters. Second effect, if this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect except by its own effect, you can special summon one Hakai monster from your hand or deck except another copy of itself. This is just an excellent kind of starter monster in my opinion. Number one, as soon as I saw the second effect, I was like, well, if nothing else, this floats into every monster in the archetype except itself. That's very similar to something like Yang Zing's. That's really good considering it's destruction or battle and it can't miss timing, so that's pretty solid. Number two, we have learned from many years of Yu-Gi-Oh! Currently Sky Striker right now with Area Zero and Multi-Roll, etc, etc. Blowing your own cards up is not really a bad thing. This card does not have to be normal summon. You can pop your own card. Basically, every card in this archetype activates when it's blown up, and also it leaves the door open for you to run things like Metaphos Fusion. Just set it, pop it, and then obviously shuffle it back into your deck, special summon this guy. This is a really solid card in my opinion. The next monster is almost identical. This is Hakai Doji Rakaya. It is a level 3 Water Fiend monster. The stat line is identical, the second effect is identical, and it is a hard once per turn on the first and second effect. I'm not gonna read the second effect again because there's honestly no point. The first effect is a little bit different, but mostly the same. It says you can target, well, it's a quick effect. It says you can target one card you control, destroy it. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except Fiend monsters. So it's almost identical. The only difference is instead of being able to special summon this card, you can activate it as a quick effect. Now that does leave the door open. I saw like Lithium's video where he was playing the Hakai archetype for you to run potentially like True Draco cards. For instance, you can run like the True Draco trap cards. You can pop them during your opponent's turn, and then obviously those will like pop monsters. Or if you pop the spell cards, you can actually like, you know, pop spells on your opponent's side of the field. It does also work with the other monsters in this deck. It allows you to pop them and then summon other monsters from your deck during your opponent's turn. Also, all the spells and traps in this archetype float, so there's also that. They summon monsters as well. Overall, very solid card. Our next monster is what really gives this deck a whole lot of spice and makes it very fun. This is Hakai Shin no Magatama, level 8 Dark Fiend monster, 0 attack, 3000 defense, hard once per turn on your second and third effects. First effect says gains 300 attack for each Hakai monster, or each Hakai card, excuse me, in your graveyard. Second effect, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. Immediately after this effect resolves, link summon one Dark Link monster using only that opponent's monster and this card you control as the materials. Third effect, if this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target one Hakai monster in your graveyard, except another copy of itself, special summon it. Okay, this card again, just like the other cards, is quite excellent. The second effect is really that insane effect that's really nuts. Keep in mind, all the monsters in this deck can summon this card. So if your opponent kills any of them, or if you kill them, you can summon this straight from your deck. Then you can link summon using your opponent's monster and using this, which that is actually pretty nuts, just being able to use their monsters. I really like that ability. The third effect, also having a nice floating effect. This card does have 3000 defense. You're almost always going to summon it In defense mode, from what I've seen, you never really attack with this card because its attack is not going to get high enough to really threaten your opponent. However, just keep in mind, this card will float, and it's really just the way that you kind of like wreck your opponent. You take their big monsters, as long as they can be targeted, you can link them away, and if your opponent has link 2s and link 3s on the field, it's really nice because you can go straight into your big link monsters. The first link monster this archetype has, and it has 3 link monsters in total, is a link 2 called Hakai Shin Regalia. It's a link 2 Dart Fiend monster, 1800 attack, points up towards your opponent and down towards you. It requires 2 monsters, including a Hakai Shin monster, so it's pretty easy to make an archetype. You can always go straight into it from your Magatama. It says the first and second are hard once per turn. The first effect on this card is just really nuts. It says during your opponent's main phase, quick effect, you can target 1 face-up special summon monster your opponent controls. Immediately after this effect resolves, link summon 1 Dark Link monster except another copy of itself, using only that opponent's monster in this card you control as the materials. Second effect, if this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target 1 fiend monster in your graveyard except another copy of itself, add it to your hand. So you're seeing with the second effect, basically every single monster in this archetype has some sort of floating ability, which is nuts. They built that not just into the main deck monsters, but into the link monsters as well. And when you think about it, that first effect is just absolutely nuts. I mean, you can have this card on board during your opponent's turn. You wait for them to special summon a monster that you don't want to have to deal with, and you just say, nope, I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to link this guy away, I'm going to link your monster away as well, and you're about to get wrecked because you just lost your monster. I'm summoning an even more powerful monster. And also keep in mind, you do not technically have to stay with an archetype. You don't have to summon another Hakai Shin monster. You can technically summon a very commonly played link monster, for instance, Nightmare Unicorn, and you'd be able to activate that during your opponent's turn for even more disruption, getting rid of like one of their other cards. I would probably not do that very often, but it is another option that's on the table, so just keep that in mind. The next link is a link 3, obviously. It's Hakai Shin Arba. This is a link 3 Dark Fiend monster, 2400 attack. This has the decode link points, and it requires 2+ monsters, including an Hakai Shin monster. The reason that all of these guys let you use other monsters very similar to Orcus, not just the in archetype Hakais, is because you're using your opponent's monster most of the time when you're link summoning with these cards. So Konami has to give you a little bit of leeway there. So this card is very similar to the last card. The only difference is it's not a quick effect. Some people were saying that this was worse than the link 2. You have to understand though that this card can target any of your opponent's monsters, whether they're a special summoned or not. Generally speaking, I think it is a little worse than the link 2 because having the disruption of using the effect on your opponent's turn is obviously nuts, but it's not like this is a bad card. Mainly you're just going to go into this card to go straight into the link 4. This is not a card that's going to stay on the field very long. This is a card basically used for link climbing. Lastly, we have the biggest and the most destructive of the link monsters. This is the link 4 Hakai Shaoshin Raigao. This is a link 4 Dark Fiend monster, 3000 attack. It has the Saryuja Skull Dread link points. It requires 2+ monsters, including a link, so you do have to link summon before you go for this card. All 3 effects are hard once per turn, and all of them include destruction in them, which is kind of crazy. First effect is if a card or cards on the field is destroyed by a card effect other than this card, you can target 1 card on the field, destroy it. Second effect, if another monster is destroyed by battle, you can target 1 card on the field, destroy it. Third effect, during the end phase, you can target 1 card on the field, destroy it. That is kind of crazy how this card can destroy 3 different cards in 3 different phases. Like that's kind of nuts. So this link 4 is obviously a behemoth, and this card is essentially like it's like destruction incarnate. This card can pop all of these cards during either player's turn. If your opponent leaves this card on the field during your end phase, you get to pop one of their cards. Also, if this card just like runs over a monster in battle, you get to pop one of your opponent's cards randomly. If this card is face up and your opponent runs over one of your monsters in battle, you get to pop a card randomly, which is kind of crazy. The first effect is stupidly easy to trigger because of the level 3 monsters. Also, you can use things like Dragonic Diagram. You can pop one of your cards on the field, then you get to blow up a card in your opponent's field. Overall, this card is amazing. The only downside of this card, as people have pointed out, is it doesn't have any protection, but honestly, I feel like things like Call of the Haunted will definitely be good in this deck because you can just bring this guy back after you link summon. As long as this card doesn't get like spun back to your extra deck or banished, I feel like even if it dies, like who cares, just bring it back easily. And this deck does have a themed Call of the Haunted in it, which I thought it definitely needed. Next card up, or I guess we're to the spells and traps. First one is the Shackles of Soho. This is a normal spell that's a hard once per turn on the first and second effects. First effect, add one Hakai card from your deck to your hand. And second effect, if this set card is destroyed by card effect, you can special summon one Hakai monster from your deck. That second effect, I believe, is built into every single spell and trap, so I'm not just going to keep repeating it. The first effect, obviously, with this card is stupidly good. This is a Rhoda for the entire archetype. Since this archetype only has 3 monsters, it definitely needed a Rhoda, but I love the fact that this card can be set on the field, you can pop it, and then you get to summon any monster in the deck. Like, that is insane. That's the reason why you're seeing people talk about Dragonic Diagram, talk about cards like Double Cyclone in this deck. Diagram, pop this card, get a monster from your deck, get a spell or trap as well. Like, it just seems really good. Next spell card is the Continuous Spell card that has a hard once per turn on both of its effects. The second effect, again, built into all the spells and traps, so I guess we'll say the first effect is the unique effect. It says, if you link summon a Hakai link monster, you can target one card on the field, destroy it. Again, this archetype just has so much destruction. This card would probably be the weakest spell in the archetype, but the reason that I think it's actually legitimate is not just because it has the removal built into it, but because this archetype can link summon during the opponent's turn, and it can do it quite easily. So this card, even though it's a continuous spell, it does serve as disruption during the opponent's turn, and if you're not going to link summon, like if you're going first or you just aren't going to link summon during that turn, you can just simply set this card, you can pop it, and you can summon a monster from your deck. So even though this card is mainly a disruptive card, it's still a 3 of in this deck because all the spells and traps just have like insane utility. Now to the 2 trap cards. The first one is Hakai Homily. It's a unique effect, and it's a hard once per turn on both of the effects. It's the unique effect is target one Hakai monster you control and one card on the field. Destroy both of those cards. This is an excellent removal card. I thought the deck definitely needed a pure defensive card, and this is essentially it. It lets you pop any of your Hakai cards and then also get rid of one of your opponent's cards as well. Keep in mind, like, everything in this archetype floats, so if you pop one of your monsters, it's really not that big of a deal. And if you have the link 4 out and you're popping your own monster, you're going to be popping additional cards on your opponent's side of the field because its effect is going to trigger as well. Basically, it's kind of like your watered down Icarus attack, but again, with all these spells and traps, you don't have to activate them as cards. You can set them on the field and blow them up. So it's just another excellent card. And the final trap is exactly what I thought this archetype needed. It is a Call of the Haunted, because I was like, dude, this archetype probably is going to benefit from things like Pot of Avarice in the OCG, and it's going to need to run a lot of Call of the Haunted, in my opinion. This is Hakai Dual Dirge. Normal trap, unique effect is special summon one Hakai monster from your hand or graveyard. Really, you're only going to be using the summon from the graveyard effect. I mean, I guess technically you can special summon from your hand because the Magatama, the big level 8 guy, he's a little bit of a brick if you do draw the card, but that's not a big deal because this archetype can already special summon from the hand with the level 3 monsters. I think mainly this card will be used to bring the link monsters back from the graveyard, especially if you bring the link 3 back from the graveyard during your opponent's end phase. You get the pop a card as well. I felt like Call of the Haunted was already going to be good in this deck, and for it to have a themed Call of the Haunted in archetype, obviously, is really good, and it just it gives you a way of getting your link monsters on the field very easily. That's why I said that you want your link monsters to just kind of die, not get banished or spun back to the extra deck, because getting them back is obviously incredibly easy, as this deck has multiple kind of summons from the graveyard. But it seems like a very fun deck. I'm not sure if it'll be better in the TCG or the OCG, because the OCG does have 3 Pot of Avarice, which could be really good in this deck, but the TCG has Dragonic Diagram, which could be nuts in this deck as well. I think things like Metaphors Fusion can obviously be solid in this deck, and I definitely want to see where this deck can go, because again, it reminds me very much of Scraps, and being able to link summon with your opponent's monsters is just kind of nuts. But whatever you guys think of the Hakai archetype, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.